And you're watching Eagle News International. Hello, CJ.
Hello, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
Sudan's top general declared a state of emergency, dissolved the authorities leading country's democratic transition, and announced the formation of a new government after soldiers detained civilian leaders Monday in what activists denounced as a coup.
World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, says greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere reached new record levels last year in a stark warning to the COP26 summit about worsening global warming.
And Afghanistan is on the brink of one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, according to UN agencies, with more than half the country facing acute food shortages.
And Filipino gymnast Carlos Yulo bags the gold in the men's vault category and silver in the men's parallel bars competition at the 2021 World Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Kitakyushu, Japan.
Sudan's top general declared a state of emergency, dissolved the authorities leading country's democratic transition, and announced the formation of a new government after soldiers detained civilian leaders in what activists denounced as a coup. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's announcement in a televised address came after forces detained figures of the government in charge of leading the transition to democracy since the April 2019 ouster of autocratic President Omar al-Bashir. Civilian members of Sudan's ruling council and ministers in Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok's transitional government had also been detained, according to the ministry in a statement on Facebook. Internet services were cut across the country around dawn, and the main roads, bridges into Khartoum shut before soldiers stormed the headquarters of Sudan's state broadcaster in the capital's twin city of Omdurman. The power grab, which comes after weeks of tensions between the military and civilian figures sharing power since Bashir's ouster, was condemned by the international community. America's special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, said the U.S. is deeply alarmed at reports of a military takeover of the transitional government. The United Nations described the detention as unacceptable. The European Union and Arab League also expressed concern. Bashir, who ruled Sudan with an iron fist for 3 decades, is behind bars in Khartoum's high-security Cobra prison. The ex-president is wanted by the International Criminal Court over charges of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in Sudan's Darfur region. Since August 2019, the country has been led by a civilian military administration tasked with overseeing the transition to full civilian rule.
The arrest by the Sudanese military of the prime minister and several other ministers is the biggest obstacle to the country's 2-year transition. An analyst at the International Crisis Group tells AFP in an online interview. Watch this.
This morning, Monday, 25th October, saw the arrest by military actors of the Prime Minister and several other ministers from the hybrid civilian-military transitional government in Sudan. This comes on the back of, a cascade of events that began really with another coup attempt about almost a month ago, and that this is certainly the biggest hiccup in the Sudan's 2-year transition, certainly the biggest obstacle to fulfillment of the sort of outcome that was laid out in the country's constitutional declaration and then reinforced by the 2020 Juba peace agreement that brought in armed groups from the peripheries. The idea within both those documents was to see Sudan move from an autocracy to an inclusive democracy. This kind of intervention, though, really adjusts that schedule and really puts autocracy back on the menu and, sees the military attempting to really seize control of this transition in what is just an incredibly existential moment for both sides. That's why it has happened now, because there's a concern that we are at an inflection point as potential elections hove into view, and as threats to the military seemed to become a little bit more clear. The international community from the western side of the ledger, who had been broadly in favor of fulfillment of this transition, they have come out against the way the military has acted and arrested the PM and minister. This has to be seen, I think, in the context, though, of the last week or so, when you've had envoys from the UK and US coming in to speak with the key figures of the military to really warn them against such a move, because it had seemed increasingly on the cards. And, those approaches were there was obviously little receptiveness to those approaches. And I think a lot of that is wrapped up in the way that the military has been empowered by other states in the region. It's happening now, I think, because the military have felt, increasing pressure from civilians in government who have tried to, highlight the prospects of justice the military might face for crimes both during the era of Bashir and even since during the revolution. There are concerns, the military has concerns that it may lose control of lucrative military companies that are absolutely key to the economy and are some of the most lucrative components of that economy.
Meanwhile, the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, Secretary General Professor Petteri Taalas says greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere reached new record levels last year in a stark warning to the COP26 summit about worsening global warming. COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference, is being held in Glasgow from October 31st to November 12th. Take a look.
Today we are talking about greenhouse gases, and we have again broken records in main greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And this negative trend that we have been observing already for decades has continued also.
The WMO said the economic slowdown caused by COVID-19 pandemic triggered a temporary decline in new emissions, but had no discernible impact on the atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases and their growth rates. The WMO also said that with continued rise in greenhouse gas emissions, alongside rising temperatures, the planet could also expect more weather extremes. And that includes intense heat and rainfall, ice melt, sea level rise, and ocean acidification, all of which will have far-reaching socio-economic impacts.
In other news, Spain vows more aid to La Palma after its volcanic eruption. The volcanic eruption on the Spanish island of La Palma, which has destroyed large swathes of land and buildings, marked its first month with no end in sight. We have Beverly Madrid, our EBC correspondent from Spain. Beverly, please tell us more.
Hi, CJ. Yes. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said that his government would pass legislation that would funnel millions of euros of aid to those in need. The Prime Minister made his fifth visit to the island since the eruption last month. The government had already assigned 63 million euros in direct aid, and they will also give another 6 million euros for the local farming and fishing industries. So far, no one has been killed by the continuous lava flows. The lava flows are still going strong over a month later, and the lava flows from the eruption on the Cumbre Vieja volcanic ridge have damaged or destroyed more than 2,100 buildings, mostly houses and farms. The molten rock, which has covered over 850 hectares, has also knocked out irrigation systems and roads in the largely agricultural area. Canary Islands President Angel Victor Torres said nobody can say that this is nearing the end. About 7,500 people have been evacuated from their homes on the island, which has a population of around 85,000 people. This is the Atlantic Island's third volcanic eruption in a century, the last one taking place in 1971. Back to you, CJ.
Thank you, Beverly, for your report. Well, we are hoping for the best for everyone there. Stay safe and tell us more if there are any more new developments happening there on your side of the world.
Thank you, CJ. Please stay safe. And reporting from Spain, I'm Beverly Madrid. We'll live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, an avalanche Sunday on a snow-capped Ecuadorian volcano, the highest peak in the country, killed at least 3 climbers and left 3 others missing, according to officials. Take a look. Now, the avalanche struck a group of 16 mountaineers while at an altitude of 6,100 meters or 20,000 feet on the dormant Chimborazo volcano, according to responders. A previous report from the country's ECU 911 security service had said 4 climbers had died and 1 was injured. Authorities didn't identify the climbers on their nationalities, but the Quito newspaper El Comercio reported that all were Ecuadorians. The avalanche was spurred by weather conditions and wasn't caused by any volcanic activity, according to the firefighters. Rescuers, as well as police and military personnel specialized in high elevation operations, set up a command center at Chimborazo to coordinate search and rescue operations. The volcano, which rises more than 6,200 meters high, is covered in snow and glaciers year-round and is located about 130 kilometers south of Quito.
Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett declares the fight against climate change a national security priority and pledged to facilitate investments in green energy. Days before the COP26 Global Climate Summit in the British city of Glasgow, which Bennett is due to attend, the Israeli government announces the creation of working groups on climate change.
משבר האקלים הוא אחד הנושאים המרכזיים על סדר היום העולמי, ובצדק, הוא נוגע לחיים של כולנו וגם לחיים של הילדים והנכדים שלנו. זה בנפשנו. אנחנו נדרשים לזה גם כאן בישראל, בכל הדרגים ובכל המשרדים.
Bennett said the government has approved decisions promoting clean and low-carbon transportation, energy efficiency, reducing emissions, encouraging technological innovation, and accelerating infrastructure. In June, the new coalition government led by Bennett set Israel the objective of reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 27% by 2030 and by 85% by 2050 compared to the 2015 level. Israel is proud of its high-tech sector with companies in the cybersecurity field, defense, and financial technologies enjoying international success and employing 1/10 of the workforce. The government sees similar innovation being deployed in the green sector.
Staying in Israel, the country on Sunday announced plans to build more residences for Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank, drawing immediate condemnation from Palestinians, peace activists, and neighboring Jordan. Now, the announcement from the Housing and Construction Ministry in right-wing Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's government said tenders had been published for 1,355 homes in the West Bank, which has been occupied by Israel since the 1967 Six-Day War. Those new homes add to the more than 2,000 residences, which defense sources have said in August would be authorized for West Bank settlers. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, speaking at a weekly cabinet meeting, called on world nations and especially the United States to confront Israel over the aggression that settlement construction poses for the Palestinian people. About 475,000 Israeli Jews live in settlements in the West Bank, which are considered illegal under international law on land Palestinians claim as part of their future state. Jordanian Foreign Ministry spokesman Haitham Abu Al-Ful blasted settlement construction and the general confiscation of the Palestinian land as illegitimate. Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank and annexed East Jerusalem has continued under every Israeli government since 1967.
Afghanistan is in the brink of one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. UN agencies warned that on Monday, with more than half the country facing acute food shortages. Watch this.
The situation is very bad. In 10 years of monitoring and measuring food insecurity in Afghanistan, it's never been this bad. And so I think we need to recognize that. So right now we have 18.8 million people who are determined to be food insecure in Afghanistan. And that number is ultimately rising in the next couple of months during the harshest period of the winter to 22.8 million people. That's over half of the population. And it's not just the increases in the number of people who are food insecure, but also the level of severity. For the winter period, we're expecting almost 9 million people to be at one of the harshest, most difficult levels of food insecurity. And if we're not able to help them, then they really will cross the precipice into extreme hunger.
More than 22 million Afghans will suffer food insecurity this winter, World Food Program said, as a drought driven by climate change adds to the disruption caused by the chaotic Taliban takeover of the country. According to the statement issued by the World Food Program and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, 1 in 2 Afghans face Phase 3 crisis or Phase 4 emergency food shortages. Phase 4 is one step below a famine, and officials told AFP that Afghanistan, already struggling to emerge from a 20-year civil war, is facing its worst winter in a decade.
In Hong Kong, a man who chanted protest slogans was found guilty of inciting secession on Monday in the second national security case to come to trial as authorities reeled a sweeping new law to snuff out dissent. Take a look. Ma Chun Man, a 31-year-old food delivery driver, was convicted by a judge of trying to separate Hong Kong from China by chanting slogans and displaying placards, as well as through interviews with reporters last year. Prosecutors said slogans Ma used that incited secession included Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times, Hong Kong Independence, The Only Way Out, Hong Kongers Build Our Own Country, One Nation, One Hong Kong, and all share and all shall be valiant, start armed uprising. Ma's lawyer said their client was merely trying to prove exercising freedom of speech is not unlawful. His slogans, they argued, were empty words and fool's ravings that didn't reflect any plan or resources.
In a related news, Amnesty International said Monday it will shutter its Hong Kong offices because of the threat posed to staff by a national security law that has fronted a sweeping crackdown on dissent in the business hub. Now, the decision came the same day a court in the Chinese city convicted a former food delivery driver of inciting secession by shouting slogans in the second national security case to come to trial. China imposed the law last year in response to massive and often violent democracy protests, transforming Hong Kong's political cultural and legal landscape and introducing mainland-style speech curbs. Anjula Miasin Jabai, chair of the Amnesty's board, said the decision to close had been made with a heavy heart and was driven by Hong Kong's national security law. The decision ends more than 4 decades of the international human rights group's presence in the city. Amnesty maintains 2 offices in Hong Kong. The first is a local branch that focuses on human rights and campaigns in the city itself. Recent reports published by the team have included investigations into how the security law has been deployed and studies of the police's use of force against democracy protesters. The second office is a regional headquarters that carries out research and advocacy work across East and Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Amnesty said the local office would close on October 31st, while the regional office would move out by the end of the year.
Alec Baldwin was rehearsing a scene that involved pointing a prop gun at the camera lens when he fatally shot cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, according to U.S. media, citing an affidavit recording his director's account of the tragedy. Director Joel Souza, who was standing behind Hutchins when the gun fired, said he heard what sounded like a whip and then loud pop, according to the affidavit released to U.S. media on Sunday. Souza said Baldwin was sitting in a pew in a church building setting, and he was practicing a cross draw. Joel said he was looking over the shoulder of Halyna when he heard the gunfire, according to NBC News. It quotes Souza as saying he remembered Hutchins complaining about her stomach and grabbing her midsection. Joel also said Halyna began to stumble backwards and she was assisted to the ground. The affidavit said, according to NBC, Joel explained that he was bleeding from his shoulder and he could see blood on Halyna. Hutchins, 42, was struck in the chest when Baldwin fired the prop gun he had been told was safe on the set of low-budget Western Rust in New Mexico on Thursday. She was declared dead in hospital hours later. Souza, 48, was treated by doctors and then sent home. Police are still investigating the shooting and have executed a search warrant at the set. Attention is also focused on the film's assistant director, Dave Halls, who handed the weapon to the actor, and on the armorer, 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez Reed. No one has been charged and no arrests have been made. The incident happened after a lunch break, Souza reportedly said in the affidavit, adding that he wasn't sure if the gun had been checked again for safety after the break. A camera operator also reportedly said the incident was not caught on film as the cast and crew were still preparing for the scene.
Calls were multiplying in Hollywood Sunday to ban the use of firearms on movie sets 3 days after actor Alec Baldwin fatally shot cinematographer Halyna Hutchins in a shocking on-set tragedy. A memorial service will be held later Sunday for 42-year-old Hutchins, who was struck in the chest when Baldwin fired a prop gun during the filming of the low-budget Western Rust. He died shortly after the incident Thursday in New Mexico. A petition on the website change.org calling for a ban on live firearms on film sets and better working conditions for crews had gathered more than 15,000 signatures by Sunday. There is no excuse for something like this to happen in the 21st century, says the text on the petition launched by Bandar Abduliwi, a screenwriter and director. Dave Cortese, a Democrat elected to the California Senate, put out a statement on Saturday saying there is an urgent need to address alarming work abuses and safety violations occurring on the set of theatrical productions, including unnecessary high-risk conditions such as the use of live firearms. He said he intends to push a bill banning live ammunition on movie sets in California. The hit Los Angeles police drama, The Rookie, decided the day after the shooting to ban all live ammunition from its set, effective immediately, according to industry publication The Hollywood Reporter.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Makabuluhang talakayan.
Sapat na po ba yun? Papasok yung 30% sa indoor, 50% sa outdoor, para to even break even? Ilan pong mga negosyo ang nagsara po dahil dito po sa pandemya?
Malalim na komentaryo.
Ngayon, sinasabi essential goods and services. Pero nakita naman po natin sa Dolomite Beach. At may time clock yung mga bata doon.
Umaapaw sa impormasyon.
Ano ba ngayon ang allotted budget per voter? Yung hindi daw bakunado po ng mga empleyado, hindi sila pinapasweldo. Oras!
Pero hindi rin nagpapahuli sa kakulitan.
Merong nag-file for the presidency. Hinimok daw siya ng mga alien at ang kanyang plataforma po ay palakasin ang Wi-Fi. At ito si Ali magde-demonstrate paano mag-swimming na may face mask.
Kaya, nood na kina Ali Soto at Pati Daza sa ASPN. Ano sa palagay nyo?
Kung kayo po ay may pinagdadaanan, daanan nyo lang. Huwag niyong tambayan.
Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 hanggang alas 10 ng umaga.
Oras, alas 9:26 na po ng umaga. At nagbabalik po ang ASPN.
Mapapanood sa Net25 at mapapakinggan sa DZEC, Radyo Aguila at Eagle FM 95.5.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. Tens of thousands of people in northern China were under strict stay-at-home orders on Monday as authorities sought to stamp out a growing COVID outbreak in the run-up to the Beijing Winter Olympics. Take a look. Officials in the Chinese capital also restricted access to tourist sites and advised residents not to leave the city unless necessary, although regular transport services continued as normal. China reported 39 new cases on Monday, bringing the tally from the latest Delta variant-linked outbreak to more than 100 cases over the past week. The numbers are extremely low compared with most places in the world, but China has pursued a zero-case strategy throughout the pandemic, and authorities are determined to subdue the latest outbreak with the Winter Olympics just over 100 days away. Around 30,000 people were expected to take part in a marathon, which was scheduled to happen on October 31st. Now, marathon organizers said it was canceling that event in order to prevent the risk of the epidemic spreading and effectively protect the health and safety of the majority of runners, staff, and residents. Some 23,000 residents, meanwhile, in one housing compound in Changping district have been ordered to stay indoors after 9 cases were found there in recent days.
Hong Kong's decision to pursue a zero-COVID strategy and maintain some of the world's strictest quarantine measures is hammering the city's business reputation, the top lobby group for financial firms in the city said Monday. The warning came as a survey showed almost half of major international banks and asset managers are considering moving staff out of the city as they struggle to retain employees or attract fresh talent. Hong Kong has been kept comparatively free of the coronavirus thanks to strict travel curbs and up to 21 days of mandatory hotel quarantine for anyone arriving in the finance hub. But there is growing frustration among businesses that there is no end in sight to the restrictions as officials make it clear opening up to the Chinese mainland must come before any easing of international travel curbs. On Monday, the Asia Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association published a letter to Finance Secretary Paul Chan that warned Hong Kong was being left behind while rival financial centers such as London, New York, Paris, Singapore, and Tokyo were learning to live with the coronavirus. The letter warned that Hong Kong's status as an international financial center is increasingly at risk, along with its long-term economic recovery and competitiveness as a premier place to do business. Earlier this month, city leader Carrie Lam said the mainland was more important than international business and that even a single fatality from the coronavirus would be a major concern.
Here in Manila, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque on Monday said there is a big possibility that the current alert level 3 status of the National Capital Region, or NCR, will be downgraded as the average daily attack rate continues to decrease. Citing data from the Department of Health or the DOH, Secretary Roque said the 2-week attack rate within Metro Manila is currently at 52%, while the average daily attack rate has decreased. Let's listen in.
Uulitin ko lang po yung sinabi ni Yusek Vergere, no, na malaki ang posibilidad na maibababa ang alert level kasi nga po nakikita natin yung datos ay bumababa, no? Negative 52% na po yung ating 2-week attack rate. Tapos yung ating average daily attack rate ay bumaba po ng 9.87. Tapos yung ating COVID bed utilization rate is now at 39% and 48% for ICU bed. So malaki po yung possibility na bababa tayo ng alert level, no?
After recording a significant drop in COVID infections, the IATF-EID has earlier approved the recommendation to place the NCR under Alert Level 3 from October 16 to the 31st. The lowering of restrictions will further allow the reopening of more businesses in the region. Secretary Roque said the final decision on the NCR's alert level will be tackled during the next IATF-EID meeting on Thursday.
Tapos yung ating average daily attack rate ay
Malacanang appealed to the people visiting the newly opened Manila Baywalk Dolomite Beach to continue adhering to the minimum public health standards despite the decreasing COVID-19 infections. Now, this after the Manila Baywalk Coordinating Office recorded tens of thousands of people, including children accompanied by their parents, who visited the Dolomite Beach over the weekend. Take a look.
Well, unang-una po ang mga bata, talagang for essentials lang po na dapat lumalabas ang kanilang mga tahanan, no? So hindi pa po pwede talagang magpasyal-pasyal ang mga bata. So unang-una nananawagan po kami sa ating mga kababayan, no? Pandemya pa po. Bagamat bumababa po ang mga kaso natin, nandiyan pa po si COVID-19, no? So wag po tayo magpabaya, no? Kinakailangan po mask, hugas, iwas, at kung kakayanin na, bakuna nga po, no? Nananawagan din po kami sa kapulisan, siguro dyan po sa Maynila, no? Kinakailangan po ipatupad natin yung social distancing, no? Talaga naman po ang Dolomite for the enjoyment of everyone. Pero wag naman hong maging dahilan yan para magkaroon tayo ng super spreader event.
Setting up the Manila Bay Dolomite Beach is a vital part of the Manila Bay Rehabilitation Project, spearheaded by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Among other efforts also include continuous bay and estero cleanups and the setting up of sewage treatment plants. The rehabilitation program that started in January 2019 was also called Battle for Manila Bay, aimed at restoring the water quality of Manila Bay in accordance with the writ of continuing mandamus of the Supreme Court. President Duterte's directive also includes the monitoring of establishments for pollution and compliance to required standards, as well as checking of water quality in key river mouths, outfalls, and bathing beaches along the Manila Bay region.
Meanwhile, unvaccinated players will be allowed to compete at the Australian Open, but must do 14 days in quarantine. That is according to a leaked WTA email on Monday, although a government official insisted the matter was not settled. Now, the rules would also likely apply to the men's tour, leaving the door open for world number 1 Novak Djokovic to defend his title at Melbourne Park in January. The email to players from the women's governing body was leaked to New York Times tennis writer Ben Rothenberg, who posted it on Twitter and contradicts officials' earlier statements implying unvaccinated players would not be granted visas. The email said that players fully inoculated against coronavirus would not have to quarantine or remain in biosecure bubbles, enjoying complete freedom of movement. The apparent move to allow unvaccinated players into Australia contradicts comments from senior government officials last week, including Immigration Minister Alex Hawke, who said every visitor to Australia will need to be double vaccinated. Victoria State Sports Minister Martin Pakula insisted Monday that the vaccination requirements were not settled yet.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away. Welcome back to the news. UK retail sales volumes dropped for a 5th month in a row during September as the country suffers supply constraints and high prices. Here's Nicole Salenga for more.
UK retail sales volumes dropped for a 5th month in a row during September, official data showed Friday, as the country suffers supply constraints and high prices. Sales volumes dropped 0.2% last month from August, the Office for National Statistics said in a statement, revealing the longest retreat on record. Household goods were the main driver of September's decline, with a fall of nearly 10%, noted ONS Economic Statistics Director Darren Morgan. Despite the lifting of lockdown restrictions, in-store retail sales remained subdued, with many consumers still opting to shop online, Morgan added. Although sales of petrol surged in late September as drivers rushed to fill up their tanks, a UK fuel shortage crisis likely meant consumers visited stores only for necessities, analysts said. AJ Bell financial analyst Danny Hewson said that non-food sales pulled down September's figures. Furniture stores have been warning for months that big-ticket, big-size items have been caught up in the shipping crisis, and that seems to have worked its way through to consumer sales, Hewson added. The UK is facing delays to the shipping of goods owing to an acute shortage of lorry drivers. Helen Dickinson, chief executive of the British Retail Consortium, said UK retailers will be concerned just as they begin their preparations for the all-important Christmas period, which last year was disrupted by a pandemic lockdown. This time around, the run-up to the festive season has been affected by supply disruption as economies reopen from lockdowns. Nevertheless, UK private sector business activity expanded at the fastest pace in 3 months in October, a key survey showed Thursday. Growth was, however, accompanied by an unprecedented rise in inflationary pressures due to higher wages and supply chain costs, according to the survey from IHS Markit and the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. Britain is meanwhile forecast to see an interest rate hike from the Bank of England as soon as November to help dampen inflation, which could force consumers to cut spending ahead. The BOE's new chief economist, Hugh Pill, said in an interview with the Financial Times on Thursday that the UK annual inflation rate risks shooting above 5% in the coming months from 3.1% currently. British annual inflation cooled slightly in September, but remained close to a 9-year peak, data showed earlier this week. The rate fell to 3.1% from 3.2% in August, which was the highest level since early 2012. High inflation is weighing on companies and consumers globally, while rate tightening is used by central banks to try and dampen price rises. Energy prices in particular are surging, in some cases causing companies to reduce or even temporarily pause operations. Britain faced petrol shortages earlier this month, partly caused by a lack of EU lorry drivers post-Brexit that triggered queues and panic buying at pumps. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I am Nicole Salenga. We live in interesting times.
And 11 masterpieces by Pablo Picasso fetched $108.9 million at a Sotheby's auction in Las Vegas on Saturday. Take a look. The works went under the hammer at the Bellagio Hotel and Casino, known for its extensive art collection ahead of what would have been the Spanish painter's 140th birthday. The jewel and the crown of MGM Resorts auction collection was Femme au Beret, or Rouge Orange, woman with a red-orange cap, one of the last portraits by the artist of Marie-Therese Walter, who he began an affair with when she was 17 years old and inspired by many of his most celebrated works. It sold for nearly $40.5 million after a starting price was estimated at $20 to $30 million. Painted in January 1938, the portrait of his beloved muse, Marie-Therese Walter, stands as a crowning achievement amid one of Picasso's most inspired and productive periods, according to Sotheby's in a tweet. Two iconic portraits from the last years, or from last year's of the painter's life were also sold. Man and Child for $24.4 million, and the bust of man at $9.5 million, which sold below its estimated starting price of $10 million. Other works sold include ceramics, several works on paper, and a number of still lifes.
Finally, in our news, Filipino gymnast Carlos Yulo bags the gold in the men's vault category and silver in the men's parallel bars competition at the 2021 World Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Kitakyushu, Japan. We have Dennis Liu for the report. Dennis.
Kaloy Yulo became the new champion in the vault competition of the FIG Artistic Gymnastics World Championship after his near-flawless routines in the final on Sunday in Kitakyushu, Japan, won him the gold. Bouncing back from a fifth place finish in his pet event, the floor exercise final on Saturday, Yulo scored an average of 14.916 points in the vault final, enough to rule the 8-man field and take home the championship. In his first vault, he went for a Kasamatsu routine, which earned him a 14.8. He then performed a Dragulesque routine on his second try, which he landed almost perfectly, meriting him a 15.033 for the aforementioned average. Hidenobu Yonekura of Japan took home the silver after averaging 14.866 points in his two jumps, while Andrei Medvedev of Israel won the bronze with an average of 14.649. Ukraine's Nazar Cherpuni, who topped the qualifying phase on Wednesday, made a huge threat to Yulo's bid, as his first attempt gave him a 14.866. However, he failed to land properly on his own Kasamatsu stunt and settled for a 13.433 in his second vault for an average of 14.149, dropping him to 7th. Yulo is eyeing a second gold for the day as he is competing in the parallel bars final. That's all for today. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. We live in interesting times.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Did you hear what the panelists said about Carlos Yulo? They said, it's poetry in motion.
Wow.
There you go. Congratulations again, Kaloy. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The week is just starting. We'll see you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. And before we go, happy 10 years anniversary. I wasn't able to make a greetings, but now I'm greeting Mata ng Agila. Happy 10 years. And we have many
happy
more
10 years. I wish we can celebrate together.
Yes, we will. And at the end of the day, as I said, there's always something to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we live
in interesting times.
Malalayong lugar ang kanilang narating para maghanap buhay. Tulungan ang pamilyang iniwan sa sariling bayan. Yan ang ating mga overseas Filipino worker.